Y'all, the posthumous meat writing for Charlie Kirk by centrist and liberal men is, I cannot. Let's start with this bullshit out by Ezra Klein this morning. And I'm sorry I ever said a nice thing. Back in late January, early February, he had a piece that was comforting, reassuring, in a way that I now find clueless. I should have known because Ezra Klein has been on his libertarian transformation journey for a number of years now. All of his neoliberal partner with the Koch brothers abundance nonsense, which, by the way, really pisses me off that he uses that term abundance, which is a term that has an entirely different meaning in permaculture. I frankly find it offensive to hear Ezra Klein use it to mean what wealthy men do a capitalism. Actually, I had somebody DM me, because I did a video about Ezra Klein a couple days ago, and I had somebody DM me and be like, have you noticed how he, the last couple of years is like much more filled out and he loves to wear real tight shirts to emphasize that fact? Yeah, the nerdy dude gets into gym bro culture to alt-right pipeline. 0% surprising. I'm not saying Ezra Klein is on the right. I'm definitely saying he's not on the left. So as I what the fucked through Ezra's entire opinion piece in the New York Times today on Charlie Kirk. By the way, if you don't want to pay to subscribe to the New York Times and you don't want to pay to read that article, if you go to Ezra Klein's Blue Sky, he has it as a gift link so you can read it for free. As I read through this whole piece, there was one part in particular that stood out to me. First of all, why the fuck are you eulogizing Charlie Kirk? Where was your eulogy for Melissa Hortman? Where's your lamentations? Where's your sackcloth and ashes for all of the students who have died in school shootings? Where is your piece on the students who were shot the same day as Charlie Kirk in Colorado? And yet you have this huge piece. Right? I frankly found it offensive that Ezra started off his piece using all of these other stories that deserve far more attention as like the intro to his grand exploration of Charlie Kirk. These folks are the setup, they're the segue into you focusing on Charlie Kirk. You can dislike much of what Kirk believed, and the following statement is still true. Kirk was practicing politics in exactly the right way. This paragraph sponsored by the Unfuck America tour. Where's the resounding condemnation of his violent, hateful rhetoric, Ezra? It's reading like, we can agree to disagree, but man, he was really effective at what he did. I've seen two forms of reaction that are misguided, however comprehensible the rage or horror that provoked them. One is a move on the left to wrap Kirk's death around his views. After all, he defended the Second Amendment, even admitting it meant accepting innocent deaths. I'm going to complain 0% about my 17-year-old son washing dishes in the kitchen. My bedroom's just off the kitchen. Unprompted. My 17-year-old is washing dishes unprompted. Anyway, I haven't seen a single person on the left being like, oh, let's wrap Charlie's death around his opinions on the Second Amendment. And let's be clear, it wasn't a defense of the Second Amendment, it was a defense of the gun lobby, of the NRA's position on mass proliferation of firearms and blocking any common sense gun reform. This is just a very weird framing. Ezra appears to be grasping at straws for some way to be like, the left's reaction here is not right. It's just as bad as people on the right. The people who are making threats against trans folks and Black colleges and universities and Democratic lawmakers. These two conversations and reactions, they're not the same, Ezra. This next part here is going to be the kicker, and I'm going to use it to transition into the reactions from a couple of other white men who are, you could argue, centrist or a little bit on the left. Okay, backing up a little bit, because this is the part that really cheesed me off. I did not know Kirk, and I am not the right person to eulogize him. But I envied what he built. A taste for disagreement is a virtue in a democracy. Liberalism could use more of this moxie and fearlessness. In the inaugural episode of his podcast, Gavin Newsom of California hosted Kirk, admitting that his son was a huge fan. What a testament to Kirk's project. But I envied what he built. This I think is the crux of the issue when it comes to all of the white centrist or leftist male influencers who are crashing out over Charlie's death. They're despondent, they're distraught. I realize Dean Withers has been dragged all over the internet for his reaction, which again, somebody who was part of the Unfuck America tour following Charlie Kirk around the country. Charlie Kirk literally created business. I'm sure Dean saw him as like a colleague. They were making money for each other. Maybe that's a little too jaded of me, but let's see how Dean responded.
Imagine, imagine being a 12-year-old, watching your dad fucking die. Nobody. Nobody deserves that. Not even Charlie Kirk.
I mean, Ezra Klein would scold us if we try and have a conversation about how Charlie Kirk met the manifestation of his harmful rhetoric. Again, there's a creator that I follow that said Charlie Kirk gave consent in advance for what happened to him by advocating for public executions and saying that if some innocent people die every year because we have a big gun problem in this country, well, that's worth it to have his version of the Second Amendment. But Ezra Klein says, no, the left can't have that conversation. The left can't talk about you reap what you sow. Not to quote Shakespeare and Gungor back to back here, but these violent delights have violent ends, and those who live by the gun die by the gun. We can't have that conversation, Ezra, or you see us as bad as people on the right making death threats against trans folks and black folks. I understand that Dean is young, but again, there's something going on here because it is these liberal, centrist creators, men in the podcast, like I want to create a Charlie Kirk of the left. Or really like, I want to be the Charlie Kirk of the neoliberal establishment Democrats. They're having a real hard time. They're having a real hard time right now. Because I think secretly on some level, they all respected him. They all liked him. They all wanted to be him, but with a slightly more palatable bent, with less offensive politics. But they wanted that kind of fame, that adulation, that attention, that profit. They were envious of what he created. I want to give one more example here because I've seen a number of my mutuals, probably because of the kind of music I listen to, who are really upset at Jesse Wells' reaction, which to me, I was like, why are you surprised? Jesse Wells went on Joe Rogan a couple of weeks ago. I feel like all of these men who want to be successful, their social media promotion of their music or their politics, their podcasting, they're not all that different from each other. They're not all that disparate. So of course, Jesse wrote a song about what happened to Charlie Kirk. And he said this.
I heard laughing, I heard glee, but it could have been you, could have been me.
Really? Really, Jesse Wells? It could have been you, it could have been me, could have been any of us? Because last I checked, you and I were not spouting hateful rhetoric, advocating actively for harm against Black, trans, and women Americans, against people in poverty, against the elderly. Last I checked, you and I weren't advocating for public executions. Again, I just want to remind you that the only folks who had issued known threats against Charlie Kirk were also on the alt-right. So I don't know, the whole song just really pissed me off because I think a normal person looking at what happened to Charlie Kirk would not be like, oh, it could have been me. What does it say? What does it say about dudes who go on Joe Rogan, dudes who go on the Unfuck America tour, dudes who want to be podcast bros, dudes who are envious of what Charlie Kirk built, that their immediate reaction is like, oh my God, that could have been me. I got death threats, multiple death threats, all from white men, by the way. And unfortunately, yeah, I did report them to the FBI. You motherfuckers made me have to report something to law enforcement over my video where I simply said, all of your complicated emotions over what happened are valid and normal. You should not feel guilty if you feel relief when a person who is harming you is no longer able to commit that harm. I got death threats and I didn't say, oh God, that could have been me. My first thought was a lot of trans folks are going to be in danger after what Nancy Mace said. Immediately coming out all over the press and claiming it was likely a trans person, which we know that it wasn't now, though we had no indication that it was in the first place. My immediate thought was Charlie Kirk's last words were a racist dog whistle. Black folks are going to be in danger after this. Immediately, we saw a slew of bomb threats and violent threats against historically Black colleges and universities. The fact that so many white men are crashing out because they think it could have been them. Because they secretly, on some level, maybe not so secretly, actually, they just thought it was a political disagreement, right? These are guys who are like, this is an empire that I respected. Mad props to Charlie for his hustle. When I say that capitalism fucks everything, the pursuit of profit and power is inherently destructive. This is what I'm talking about. The Ezra Kleins, the centrist liberal podcast bros, the influencers making a shit ton of money, Gavin Newsom's of the world. Like, did they even really find Charlie Kirk that offensive? Because the sobbing in sackcloth and ashes that I'm seeing now makes me think, not so much.